And we want to continue that conversation now with our friend from the Locked On Steelers podcast, DK Pittsburgh Sports. You see him all over the place. It's Chris Carter. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great, Josh. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Hey, I was just debating with myself, because that's what you do on a solo show. I was debating on this situation I think that we're going to see emerge here this summer with the Steelers, and that is, does Kenny Pickett have to start right away? And I'm curious to get your thoughts, because there are some people that are firmly in the camp of, if you're going to bring in a quarterback who's going to be 24 years old, that he needs to be out there week one. I'm not so sure that I buy into that. I think that he needs to play when he's ready, not necessarily right away if he's not ready. What do you think on that? Is it best for him? Is it best for the Steelers if Pickett is out there, maybe if he's not completely ready week one?
I mean, I don't think it's a necessary thing. I mean, you've seen Ben Roethlisberger didn't start his first game with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he might have set his whole rookie season had Tommy Maddox not gotten hurt in Game 2 of his rookie year. So, yeah, I don't think that's a priority. I mean, Patrick Mahomes didn't play at all his first year, and he was just fine. I don't put much stock into that. I would say, though, that I like the idea of just having an open competition. If he's the best quarterback, put him out there. And I think that's what the Steelers want to do this year. Give him a real competition. If he wins, great. You scored there. If he loses, it's like, okay, well, you know what you have to do better, and you get to watch this season from the sidelines until, someone gets hurt or we just need you, and we'll see how you step up in those moments. But I don't think there's any secret here. I don't think there's any, we're gonna hide the idea that we're gonna just bench him and that he doesn't actually stand a chance to win the starting job. I think it's just going to be a straight up competition the way the Steelers want it. They got 3 quarterbacks who each have decent arms, each can be mobile when they need to be, and between those guys, they'll say, hey, who is most ready to be the starter on day one? Don't make the big turnovers. Make sure that you make throws when we provide them to you with the schemes, and let's see how it happens. I think it's going to be a fun training camp to watch.
I want to just make sure I heard you correctly there. Did you say 3 quarterbacks?
Well, I mean, 4 quarterbacks will be on the roster. But, yes, I do think that Mason Rudolph, a lot of people are assuming Mason Rudolph's getting cut or getting traded. I don't think that's going to be the case. I mean, maybe if they want to free up the cap space that he has tied to him, like $5 million or something like that. But, truly, Josh, I think they look back. I mean, people forget 2019 was 3 years ago. They went from, we had 4 quarterbacks in the stable. We traded away 1. And then within a couple of weeks, Ben Roethlisberger's out for the year, and then Mason Rudolph is clocked by Earl Thomas, and then you're down to Devlin Hodges. I don't think they ever want to be in that spot again, especially in a year where, that year, you could say, okay, freak accident happened to Ben Roethlisberger, but you don't know how desperate Mitch Trubisky might get in a year where he has to prove himself. He might do something that gets himself hurt. Someone might hit him because he's holding onto the ball too long, and that might take him out, and then you might have similar situations with your next quarterback. I think they need to carry all 3 of those guys all season long and see where they stand at the end of the year. And remember, Mason Rudolph's on a 1-year deal, so after this, sorry, all right, see you. If he's not the guy, but you have that competition, you let that see, and then you make sure you're prepared for if people start to go down later this year.
Well, Chris, my thought with that is, if you're Mason Rudolph, do you really want to be in a place where, when last season ended, Mason Rudolph probably thought that he was going to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year? Is he going to want to be in a place where he's the third-string quarterback? Should he want to be in a place, or is there a better opportunity perhaps for Mason Rudolph out there? If I'm Mason Rudolph personally, I would have, the second that Kenny Pickett was drafted, I would have demanded a trade.
So here's my thing. Where else you going to go, Josh? Look at Baker Mayfield, a number 1 overall pick. He is screaming at the top of his lungs, putting his middle name on his Twitter profile and sending out demands and ultimatums, and nobody wants him. No one's trying to take him for that. Now, granted, he has a higher price tag, and there's other things with that. But if teams who has seen something from Mason Rudolph that says, "Oh yeah, we're going to just definitely go trade a draft pick for that guy"? If I'm Mason Rudolph, I sit pat. The Steelers stood by that man when he was accused of saying racist things to Myles Garrett. They stood by. He knows this organization respects him. They gave him a contract worth millions to keep him around. I think that he respects that. He's like, hey, you know what? If I lose out in the competition, I lose out in competition. But this team is trying to win, and you have to understand, if you're Mason Rudolph, I haven't shown them that they can go into. I can lead this team to the playoffs. This is your year to prove it. They're giving you an open competition. And, it's sort of a thing where if if Mason Rudolph was a former first-round pick and had won you like several playoff games, and he wasn't the reason, like he was carrying you to victory, it'd be a different story. You'd have some pedigree, you'd have some respect that you've earned. But the only respect that he's earned is that he's tough and that he's come back from injuries and that he's young and that they want to see more out of him. You're not promised anything. This team needs to get better. That's the business of the NFL. I think that Mason Rudolph is a professional. I think that he's a good mind as far as understanding how this works, and he's going to take it and say, you know what? I don't care who's in the locker room with me. I'm going to go out there and do my best to prove that I should be the starter. I don't think he'll win the job, but I think that he's a mature enough man that he's going to handle it that way. And if he's third string on the year, he's like, you know what? I'll ride this out. And if someone wants to trade for him, okay, we'll see what compensation they'll give. But him making a fuss, I mean, it's going to be like, it's different when Matt Ryan or when Deshaun Watson or when a big name who's been in the top 10 conversation, a quarterback makes a fuss. But when you're Mason Rudolph, I mean, you're not even top two quarterbacks on your team right now. I mean, what mess do you actually go and create?
Yeah, no, I get that point. This is why I love having you on, because you say things that I don't agree with, but you convince me, I think, of your point of view, Chris. Listen, this team obviously had a clear directive, I guess, when it was drafting, a clear path that it wanted to enable its quarterbacks to have as many weapons as possible. My question now with this is, with all of the talent that we saw as far as pass catchers go, brought in, with Najee Harris, with Pat Freiermuth added into that equation as well. And then obviously you have, a couple of good receivers already, and Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, and the players that they've brought in this offseason. Who becomes the odd man out in this equation? Because I think back to last year when they had a pretty good receiver in James Washington who couldn't get on the field because of the guys in front of him for the most part, and the way that the offense was rolling, I guess, if you want to say that, without him. But he couldn't get on the field. Now they're going to have maybe multiple guys left out of this equation that are pretty good wide receivers. How is that going to play out, and who becomes the odd man out when they go 4 wide or 5 wide? Because you can't put everybody out there.
No, I agree. There's always going to be guys that have to sit down. I do think that – I don't think it's going to be an immediate sort of, hey, this guy's just going to be out of the rotation. I mean, one thing to remember about James Washington, I think that guy just got dealt. So he just got dealt a raw hand in Pittsburgh, and not like the Steelers did him wrong. But his first year, Ben Roethlisberger didn't pay much attention to him in 2018. His second year, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't even there. He actually had a pretty good season. If Ben was there, he might have had a very good season. And then in his third year, 2020, he was part of the equation, but Ben Roethlisberger was starting to fall off. And, of course, last year, Ben Roethlisberger was the worst version of himself we've ever seen. So if James Washington had come in the mid-2010s, I think he would have been a very good number 2 to Antonio Brown, and people would talk about him differently in this town, and he'd still be on the roster. I think with the situation now, the Steelers, them drafting 2 guys, was more of a situation where, like, hey, Deontay, I know your contract's up after this year, but you haven't put together the complete season to be a wide receiver 1 definitively for this team and get wide receiver 1 money. Now, you might be able to do that this year. You took serious strides last year, and I think anybody that's an honest evaluator tape would agree that Deontay Johnson did some significant improvement work on his game last year. But he still sort of had those drops at the end of the season. He still needs to become a complete guy. I think that he can be a wide receiver 1. But this is what you tell him. Like, look, buddy, if you do great this year with Kenny or Mitch or Mason or whoever, you'll probably get that money to stick around because we want whatever young quarterback we have to have the guy that they trust the most. But if you're just okay and these other guys are beating you out, they're not breaking the bank for you. And I think that's what a lot of wide receivers around the NFL are figuring out. I mean, Josh, there were, I think, 6 receivers taken in the top 18 picks this year. And that's not even including all the guys that went in the second round, like George Pickens. NFL teams are realizing you can get really, really good wide receiver talent up to even the 4th round, like Calvin Austin. People are really excited about what he can do. And it's on a rookie deal. So, personally, I think that there's not going to be a specific odd man out right away. I think Calvin Austin might be used in more situational positions. But it's just going to be about who wins out in camp. Does Chase Claypool get back to where he was as a rookie? Does Deontay Johnson take the next step? How does George Pickens come along? I think it's going to be another honest battle, but I wouldn't preclude either Claypool or Johnson from getting any opportunities just yet. or being phased out like we saw James Washington. I think that's just going to come over time.